take into account, this is Dr. Simon and Dr. Walker, the socio-economic realities that play out in our communities, i.e. poverty, i.e. crime. Does that impact on the learning experience of a child, and if so, to what extent? Because we hear that the children go hungry, children who've been up at night trying to deal with what's going on in the household. Is that, how do we steer for that being an issue? And does it impact the learning experience of a child in public or any school?
Sure.
Yes. We'll go to Dr. Simon.
First of all, we all come from humble educational beginnings when most of us did not have much, but what our parents and grandparents knew was education was mandatory, period, because that was the way to anything else in the world that you wanted, no matter where you came from. And as I mentioned in the opening, to answer your question directly, the new model for how to change a horrific school in an extremely poor and dangerous neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, and if you follow the news, it does not get much worse than life for children on the south side of Chicago. Last year alone, they had 156 murders of school kids in a year. Now, if that had happened in any other place, of any other ethnic group, they would shut that city down. Those children were allowed to be hunted. Now, having said that, in that same neighborhood, a school was shut down because it was not performing, it was poor, and they opened a school called Urban Prep Academy. If you've never heard the story of the young men from Urban Prep is only about 4 years old. It's an all-male black boy high school. They opened 4 years ago. Their first graduating class graduated in May, and guess what happened? Again, these were the same kids that were destined for jail, in poverty, and in that rough neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. In May, the entire class of seniors of all black boys, about 116 of them, all graduated with 4-year scholarships. Every single one. How did they do that? The school, it's a charter school. They closed down the school that was not doing what it was supposed to do. Men from that community who were educators said, let us take the school, make it a charter school. We will design the curriculum. We will determine what they're taught. Dump the state curriculum. And we will instill discipline. They wear uniforms, they wear ties, and they wear watches every single day. They have expectations. And that school is now the school everyone wants to get their child in. If you can turn that school into the #1 model in the country as to how to build a school in poverty, if we can follow their model, I think we can fix it anywhere in the nation.
Dr. Walker, you served as Commissioner of Juvenile Justice. You've seen them come in. You've only been on part of the road board. Same question.
Thank you. Poverty is something that I think we must look at in 2 ways. We have impoverished conditions, and we can have an impoverished mind. And if you are the benefactor of both of them, there's not much hope for you. But you can be in an impoverished condition, but if you have a fertile mind, you can rise above it. So we have to be real careful, I think, when we talk about poverty and its effect. Case in point. My hometown is Tombstone, Georgia, in Upson County. I graduated from what you may know as a colored high school. It was segregated by law. I graduated in '54, the year of the Supreme Court decision. But I had in Tombstone, Georgia, a grandmama and 3 inspirational teachers, Mr. Kahn, Miss McGill, and Miss Flack. And my grandma Emma made me think I was a bright young boy and I could learn. And Mr. Kahn taught me history, and he became my role model. But in terms of poverty, it's difficult for me to describe the conditions in which we live. But when it comes to self-esteem and thinking you're somebody, I had all the expectations that I needed to take me forward. So Derrick, it's against that background, it's against that history that informed my life that I tell people, certainly poverty is a serious impediment, but we can rise above it. We can have an impoverished condition but a fertile mind. So I stress the need to develop the fertile, high expectation mind. So in answer to your question, yeah, we have to worry about poverty, and that's a fact, but we got to know what kind of poverty we're talking about.
All right. Appreciate you. Let's go to Michelle.
Thank you. I really want in on this one. I do.
All right, go ahead. We'll let you jump in on this, and then we're going to some of the questions from the... I got to ask the most important question tonight, then we'll go into the question from the audience.
Okay.
Go ahead and answer that.
Okay. There was a saying, I remember someone had told me while I was out meeting with other parents, and they said that this was something like, just because you live in poverty doesn't mean your mind has to. So I thought of that when he was talking about the difference between your body being in poverty and your mind. But anyway, I have to say, since I've been, like I said, out there working with other parents and even homeschooling, I can see that there's a difference in the priorities. Even, let me just say this. I've met with some moms who were living in an affluent area here in Georgia. And they gave me every kind of excuse as to why they could not work with their own child. Meanwhile, I went to Kids Academy where Stephen the Sport had an engagement, and there were some moms there, single moms, and I call them sister warriors, who, they're the only ones just making it work at home and doing what they can. And they tell me they get the workbooks. Sometimes instead of spending that $8 on a movie ticket, they go to a bookstore, and get a workbook. I mean, that was inspiring to hear. Now, again, when we're talking about two different economic situations. So sometimes I think that people tend to use the economic background as an excuse, because let's think about Dr. Ben Carson's mom, single mother, dealing with some personal issues, working 2 jobs, raising Ben and his brother, made sure that they read books every week. So, I mean, again, it's a matter of priorities. So I think that we shouldn't use poverty as an excuse, because again, there was just like he was talking about, there was a time in our history where a lot of our families didn't have much of anything, but education was priority for them. I don't know at what point that our values changed or switched, but they have. So again, that's just an excuse, I believe.